breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with Dr. Kolby Condos and Dr. Glenn Harrison. If this is your first time listening to the podcast and you have questions about common healthcare concerns or complaints that you have, hit like and subscribe and turn on the notifications so that when we cover your condition, you don't miss it. But today, we are going to cover something that I'm super, super passionate about and something that I implement in my day-to-day life, and that is intermittent fasting. And when we talk about intermittent fasting, we're going to go over, what is it? What is it used for? Is there any possible negative consequences of intermittent fasting? And maybe some strategies about how you guys can start implementing and building intermittent fasting into your day-to-day routine. So let's get started. But first, I'm going to ask you, how's your week been going, buddy?
It's been going good, Dr. Kolby. It's been busy. It's been good. But topics like this really make my blood lift because it's very powerful. It's actually very dangerous as well. It can turn your metabolism on, or it can shut it down and put you down. But how was your weekend? How was your week?
Man, it is so good. It's been so good. I've been super busy at work. I got my daughter's birthday's coming up, so we're getting ready for that. Getting ready to turn the big number 3, and she acts like she's 17, so I'm super stoked.
Can't wait till she's 17 then.
Oh man, if it's the same little girl like all the way from 3 to 17, I'm gonna have like lots of gray hairs by then. So.
Yeah, come in by the day.
Oh man.
So I know we were talking about this quite a bit and how we were going to explain and clarify intermittent fasting because it's been a buzz topic for quite a while, and I think it'll continuously be because it's very powerful. But I think what we really want to shed light on here is not only when it's useful, but actually when it's a serious problem, when it can actually destroy people's lives. I've seen that. So we got to take it with caution. So maybe first off, Dr. Kolby, what is intermittent fasting?
So what intermittent fasting is where there's intervals of fasting is when you don't eat any food, right? So there's no caloric intake, and your body's in a fasting state. So what intermittent fasting is like periods of fasting versus not fasting where you're ingesting your food. That's basically the easiest way I can sum it down. Another way that some people describe it is like IMF, intermittent fasting, and then some people call it time restricted feeding. Not necessarily the exact same thing, but really, really similar in some of the nomenclature. So.
Okay. So what are the benefits? What do you see as benefits? What kind of health conditions or maybe pain point or symptom or disorder you clinically would introduce intermittent fasting?
Sure. So like personally, I use this at least 5 times a week. And what I use it for is because I know that there are certain mechanisms associated with intermittent fasting that have been shown to be neuroprotective. So that it actually increases, the livelihood of the longevity of your brain. So it helps to break down like misfolded or, proteins are all stuck together so that it gets them out, it clears them out, so that you have, better blood flow or you have better connectivity in the hemispheres of your brain. So that's one reason I do it. I also notice that my energy is a lot better when I do intermittent fasting. So when I do intermittent fasting, I just stop eating after like 8 p.m. I eat dinner with my daughter and my wife around like 6:30. We're usually done around 7. So usually it's 7. I don't usually eat after 7, but 8 o'clock is my like draw off point where I don't eat after 8 o'clock. And then I don't eat again until noon the next day. And basically it's a really, really easy way that you can implement intermittent fasting into your day-to-day life because during most of that time period, you're sleeping. So you don't even really notice that you're fasting. So
yeah, okay. So what kind of conditions would you see?
As far as like the conditions or some of the symptoms and stuff like that I use, I have used it for people with like Parkinson's. I use it for people who have cardiovascular disease, people who have diabetes. All the research is showing that this can be super, super clinically relevant for these type of peoples, or these type of people or individuals or patients. I've used it for people who have issues with actually their sleep, because their blood sugar cycles and their melatonin, their cortisol rhythms are all messed up. So I've used it for that even. And it, again, if you know what you're doing, you know how to apply it, and you know in what circumstances to apply it, super, super useful, super, super powerful, but you need to do it safely.
Exactly. So that's the next thing. So being safe with intermittent fasting, I started this conversation saying how powerful it was, how great it was. Well, the other side of the coin. And from what I see, to summarize what happens with intermittent fasting is it ultimately creates gaps. You have enough time between your meals where your body starts burning up your circulating blood sugar. So it starts burning it up, and it forces you to tap into fat tissue. There's a lot of benefits to this, because if you have lower circulating blood sugar but stable, low but stable, you get rid of a lot of brain inflammation. Your body loves to run off a slow, stable fuel source like fat tissue. So if you burn up this circulating blood sugar, you force yourself to tap into fat storage, and that's that slow burning fuel. That's neuroprotective. It drives energy. It drives brain function. There's just so many benefits to burning fat for fuel versus using sugar for fuel. Using sugar for fuel creates all those, as you mentioned, cardiovascular disorders and things like that. So that's all the good stuff. But if somebody, and I know we were laughing about this earlier, if someone jumps straight from cheeseburgers and Fritos, I think you said, and dives directly
Cheetos to intermittent fasting, you are going to not like yourself.
And then they jump directly into intermittent fasting because they heard about it, they watched it online, I don't know, or they just watched the beginning of this podcast, then they're like, whoa, this isn't so good. Now I have a keto flu and I'm passing out and my body is heavy and my brain is crashing and I'm miserable. That is when it's a problem, when your body hasn't transitioned to being able to create gaps. So you have to do it in a very slow and sustainable fashion. Otherwise, it can destroy your body. And then on top of it, not everybody's body loves to do intermittent fasting. You see, the more thin, lanky types that high metabolism, they have a harder time to create gaps in their meals or go into ketosis and all of that fashion. The excess body types like mine, I put on a lot of muscle fast, but I'll also put on a lot of fat tissue fast. Me, intermittent fasting is kind of like a staple. I start running, my body starts to run really well when I create gaps in my meals. So there's a little bit of a change in that. So how does maybe Dr. Kolby, what else do you see where intermittent fasting is a bad thing or a presentation or
Yeah, so when I we talked about how it is effective for helping people manage diabetes, but you have to be cautious in certain instances and depending on the type of diabetes, right? So in a lot of the research, when you're reading it, it's like, oh, it has been shown to be beneficial for people with diabetes. Most often, not always, but you have to read into the research, they're talking about type 2 diabetes, right? So that's exclusively diet and lifestyle. We have a podcast about diabetes. If you're not sure which one it is, go back, watch it. Super informative. But if you have a true insulin-dependent diabetes or a type 1 diabetes where you have antibodies to your pancreatic islet cells and you're not making insulin, then you are going to want to be very cautious with this because your blood sugar could drop really, really quickly. And it's going to be one of those cases where you really want to monitor it carefully, and you're doing so under the close watch of a qualified medical professional for sure.
Yeah, you could just end up going too far down. Yeah. And if it drops too fast, the brain shuts down. It's extremely dangerous if the brain is starving for sugar. So I guess the next piece is, now we hear the phrase intermittent fasting or ketosis interchangeably, and I mentioned ketosis previously. Now we did do a podcast on ketosis, I believe, right? We did.
Yeah, I believe we did actually.
Yeah. So I'll have a video on that and the content in that, a link below. so you can follow that. But ketosis is connected with intermittent fasting because ketosis is just a state where your body produces ketone bodies when it's in a sugar deprived state, because it's using fat as a form of fuel. So then when you burn fat as a form of fuel, you produce these ketone bodies, and they're a massive source of energy for the brain and every other aspect of the body. Intermittent fasting is one of the strategies to get into ketosis. I've seen some people, they'll do a ketogenic diet and they can't get into ketosis. They've got to do a ketogenic diet and create gaps between their meals, more in the form of intermittent fasting, to spill over into ketosis. So that is, I guess, simply put, how intermittent fasting is connected to ketosis. Do you have anything else to add about that, Dr. Cole?
Not necessarily for that, but I do want to press, like, we've talked about how powerful this is, right? And I just was kind of thinking my way through some other things. Intermittent fasting is so powerful, and the ketogenic diet is so powerful, and it's so effective in certain circumstances that they actually used these two strategies for helping to manage people with bipolar disease or epilepsy in the 50s, prior to giving them other types of pharmaceutical medications. And it actually had a really, really high success rate. So it is super, super useful. They found that, I think we glossed over, I think we've kind of moved over how efficient and effective this can actually be for individuals. You can have dramatic weight loss. You can have dramatic drop in your markers as far as cardiovascular disease markers, like your LDL, your triglycerides, your CRP, your inflammatory CRP markers. All of these things can really, really, really respond well to intermittent fasting and ketosis and the ketogenic diet and all these things. But we're talking about intermittent fasting today, time restricted feeding and intermittent fasting, incredibly useful tools for these people that have these type of things. So don't overlook it. We're not trying to scare you off by saying it's scary or it's powerful. It is incredibly useful. So if you're having these types of things, go find someone that can help you implement this, but do it in a safe manner.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. Another category of people that I see I would never put in intermittent fasting. In fact, a lot of people that come into my office, I'll say the vast majority, I won't say, okay, let's jump into intermittent fasting. We're going to push ketosis and, we're going to hit this. We're going to hit a home run on this. Never. Most people, if they're low on energy, they don't have the metabolism to tap into fat storage. It's very difficult. So if they're low on energy, they always hold on to more fat. To get into ketosis, you need to have at least some energy to start to make that transition over into ketosis.
Well, it'd be like trying to run a marathon without ever training for it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And a big part of the biggest benefits that happen with ketosis is the ability to achieve it. There's a lot of supplements. They can artificially drive ketones up in your urine and salts and all these different things. They can help that transition. But the transition, the grunt work to get into ketosis is really where the benefits come, and it stimulates mitochondria. If you stimulate mitochondria is the energy producing organelle in your cell, and fasting, intermittent fasting and ketosis really stimulate that mitochondria, driving your energy up. But you got to have some energy before you go into that. So I'll say, like I said, the vast majority, I'll never put in intermittent fasting right away because of their sickness. But with time, yeah, we'll get them there. Another scenario, I guess it's kind of the same. I'll never get people to intermittent fast if they have adrenal exhaustion. I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this one because I know Dr. Kolby and I could go forever. But your adrenal glands feed you when you're not eating. Now, if you're adrenally compromised, meaning adrenal fatigue, adrenal insufficiency, tired all the time, your adrenal glands can't feed you when you're not feeding yourself. So what happens? You go into even a deeper state of fatigue. So reiterating what you said, Dr. Kolby, make sure anybody listening to this recognize how powerful this is, but do it the right way. Otherwise, you'll lose the benefits and you could sabotage a lot of your health.
Well, and I think it's important to maybe realize that you can build up to it too.
Yeah.
So I think that everyone, when they read articles on Yahoo or whatever, PubMed, I don't know, wherever you're getting your information, everyone's like, oh, a 3-day water fast. There is no way that I would put a new patient walking into my office, here's what we're going to do, 3-day water fast. You know what I mean? There's no way I would build them up to that. and we would start putting parameters in, and it depends on their symptoms and their condition, obviously, if they're having issues with sleep, whatever, it doesn't matter. But we are going to put, certain objectives and markers and parameters in place so that we can do this in a safe manner, because there's no way that you should walk, like, just one day decide, yeah, I'm going to do a 7-day water fast. Never going to happen. I'm going to do a 3-day water fast. Like that is not safe. That's not something that's going to give you longevity. And then you're also not going to get the results that you are desiring. So then you're not going to think it works, right? Mm-hmm. If you go into something, you're underprepared, you're not ready, your body's not adapted to doing that, then you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. And you're going to hate it.
That's right.
So making sure that you build up to that point. I sure did not start doing, 3 or 7-day water fasts right out of the gate, because there's no way I could have. So it's important that you start to take the baby steps to do that.
That's right. So briefly, if you could, generalizing, what would it look if someone was working with you, Dr. Kolby, in trying to create that transition? Very high level.
Sure. If they wanted to start implementing intermittent fasting, and they were one of my patients, I would start by doing like a time restricted feeding thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we would be like, all right, so you are going to eat between this period and this period. You can eat any time between those, but not outside of it. So we would start with some framework to their day. These are the times we're going to eat. These are the times we're not going to eat. And then eventually, after we've done some blood test, or, monitored their blood sugar levels, made sure that there's no negative consequences of the time restricted feeding, then I'm going to move into, okay, we're going to move that up a little bit, and we're going to extend it a little bit further. Mm-hmm. So, we're going to stop eating at 7 p.m. and we're not going to eat again until 10 a.m. Okay, we're not going to eat. We're going to stop eating at 7. We're going to move it till noon. I've done like a 4-day and a 7-day. I've done a 3-day. And they're not easy, but I've had to build myself up over, like, when I did the 7-day, I did over 6 months. Not the 7-day, but I started slowly, and I got my body used to, it wasn't like I one day on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day or whatever was like, New Year's resolution, going to do a 7-day water fast. You know what I mean? So I built myself up, and I did the time restricted feeding, and I implemented it slowly over time. And that was just so I could put myself in the best position so I could achieve my goal and the outcome that I wanted. Mm-hmm. But that's usually what I do. I start with time restricted feeding, and then we talk about symptoms and if they're having any negative consequences and stuff like that, and then we adjust accordingly. So
that's
what about you?
For me, if I'm implementing it, if they're completely adrenally crashed, remember their adrenals aren't working, and I see a lot of fatigue in my office. I want to nurture those adrenal glands. So I want to actually initially get them to manually feed themselves steady until their energy comes up. Now they have energy to make that conversion, to go from having high circulating blood sugar and converting them into an intermittent fast. So then we start creating gaps, kind of like you're saying, slow and sustainable gaps, farther and farther and farther apart, adding different foods in to create that gap. That's how I do it too. It's a slow transition, aiding with food, monitoring lab levels and blood sugar levels, making sure those consequences don't happen. I get very worried when I see the thin, lanky body type, the tall, thin, lanky body type, and then they want to do intermittent fast. My first question is, well, why do they want to do it? Most people are pursuing it for weight, but there are some people they're really just trying to get their blood sugar down due to diabetes or neurological conditions. The thin, lanky body types, not everybody. Those are the ones you got to be careful when they get into an intermittent fast. So if anybody's listening to this and is in that position, be careful with that. If you're a body type more like the ample body type, the excess body type like mine, it's much easier to get into it, but highly recommend do it the right way. Start it out the right way, and it can be transforming. Just make sure you're following all the pieces, because you could miss something that could be extremely protectant and to your heart, every important part of your body, which is every part of your body. I think that's maybe the most important way to look at it.
Absolutely. So if you guys got some value from this podcast today, please share it with your friends, families, loved ones. And again, if you have questions or comments on your own health concerns, stay tuned, hit the notifications so you become aware of when we crank out a new episode, because we're going to continue to do this. And if you have any information you'd like to email us, you can email us at info at brainstormingwiththedocs.com. You can find my website. My website is northlakeschiropractic.com. Dr. Harrison's is drgharrison.com.
Correct.
Or you can, and all this stuff will be in the description and the show notes and the links below.
Exactly. We'll have some links down there for everybody who's listening and watching on diabetes. There'll be links on ketosis as well. I'll put that in there so they can use all that information to understand, to get a much thorough understanding. Yeah.
So,
all right.
All right, my man.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to do, I enjoy the heck out of this. This is like one of my highlights of my week because it's just like take a break from all the other stuff that I have to do. And I just get to sit here and talk health with you for about 2 hours. So
I completely agree. I know a lot of these podcasts are doing late at night. So after a full day but it definitely brings me up to speed where we can kind of, brainstorm and talk about it and share some of the strategies and techniques that we use. But also we want to create those disclaimers to make sure people don't snowball downhill, because this is brainstorming. It's not specifically designed for any individual. Everybody has their individual differences. And when we work on topics like this, we always got to create the disclaimer. Make sure you're working with someone. I know you can work with some people. I believe you can work with some people out of state. I know I can. But I keep bugging you, Dr. Kolby, to work with more and more people remotely.
Yeah, I'm just not good at
anybody's in Minnesota, definitely call Dr. Kolby, because you might not be in literally the neck of the woods.
But I appreciate you, man. I can't wait till next week. So
all right, man. We'll talk to you next
soon.
day.